Everybody. We are delighted that all of you have joined this session. We have a little time. We have about 7 minutes. And we have a very talented visual artist with us, Indrajit. He is actually going to draw this session as we speak. So all your thoughts can have a visual form. And because we have some time, you can probably write something on your notepads and give it to him. He'd be more than happy to give it life as well. So before we start, maybe we can get some creative juices going. We have 5 minutes. Good afternoon, everybody. All right. Excellent. Thank you all for taking the time to be here. May I just request that we close the door, if that is possible? All right. We will now, we have a few chairs at this round table. Like we say, take a seat. We are inviting you to take a seat at the table. Please do join us. Don't stay at the back.
Thank you, Sonal ma'am. Good evening, distinguished guests, dignitaries, and esteemed participants. I am Anju Bala, Section Officer, Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs. And on behalf of the Ministry, I am privileged and honored to welcome you all to 18th Urban Mobility India Conference-cum-Exhibition 2025. This roundtable session is on accessibility and gender mainstreaming in mobility solutions. The session is being chaired by Ms. Aina Sanchez Madriaga. Professor Madriaga is the UNESCO Chair on Gender and Chair of the Advisory Group on Gender Issues to the Executive Director of UN Habitat. Madam is a globally recognized expert on gender and urban mobility and brings extensive experience across policy, research, and practice. Ms. Sonal Shah, founder Urban Catalyst, and Ms. Kashmira Dubesh, Deputy Director, ITDP India, will be guiding the discussion as the moderator. To begin the session, I'm honored to request Sonal ma'am and Kashmira ma'am to graciously guide the proceeding of the session.
Thank you very much, Anju ma'am. I'll set a context. India, a developed economy by 2047, with at least 50% of its residents in cities, and with a 70% of female labor force participation. But there's a bit of a problem because currently women's labor force participation in cities is lower than in rural areas. We are at 27% compared to 36% in rural areas. But again, this is not only about women's labor force participation, but about developing and realizing our capabilities, seizing or accessing opportunities in cities as agglomeration economies offer us. We know that transport can transform our cities. They are a fulcrum to do so. But we also know that our cities are not gender neutral. I think that has been firmly established. All of you over here are probably already aware. But what does that mean? It means that there are gender differences in the way men, women, and non-binary individuals experience our cities. But this difference is also unequal. And we need to make an intentional effort to understand these differences, to understand these inequalities. Some data from India, especially around transport. Research from multiple cities have shown us that women are now a majority of pedestrians. I think we know this. They're also a majority of shared IPT users. Some of our research shows 55 to 60%. Erstwhile, women constituted about 20 to 40% of public transport users. And we see the share is changing slowly because of the fare-free and fare subsidies in public bus transport, where we are now seeing women constitute a majority of public bus passengers. But let's look at the other side of the story as well. In 2020, only 7% of all driving license holders in India were women. Less than 1% of public bus drivers are women, and women constitute only about 17% of all public bus conductors. In fact, only 5% of working women are in the transport, storage, and communication sector compared to 13% of men, so almost half. 76% of all care-related travel in a city like Bangalore are by women, right? When we look at other gender identities, some of our focus groups have revealed, for example, that transgender men would not speak in buses because they were concerned that their effeminate voices would draw attention, staring, and sexual harassment. Women with disabilities have spoken about restricted travel and facing sexual harassment. So, a wide range of initiatives have been implemented in India, and a lot of attention began to be drawn to gender perspectives in mobility since Nirbhaya in 2013. I think many of us will agree it was not like nothing was done before, but a significant attention was given after Nirbhaya. The Nirbhaya Fund was created. We had a gender, which were used to create a gender and policy lab in Chennai, in Surat. In some cases, it was used to install CCTV cameras, AVLS systems, things one would argue you could do anyways, but they were used so. In other cases, the Nirbhaya funds were used to train women drivers and conductors with the intent of creating, with the intent that the presence of women would make other women feel safer. Since 2019, we've had 6 states in India and the Union Territory of Delhi who have implemented fare-free or partial fare subsidies. We know from multiple reports published by many organizations over here that women's trip travel, discretionary definitely has increased, trip distances have increased, savings have increased. We are yet to understand the impact on women's labor force participation. But a very interesting thing has happened. Public bus agencies have now begun to measure and look at sex disaggregated data. This was not happening before, right? And this, therefore, is opening up opportunities for us to better understand gender disaggregated travel behavior so that we can have more evidence around how to plan for gender responsive public bus systems. On the employment front, we are also seeing some initiatives largely around women drivers and conductors. Delhi's Mission Parivartan resulted in 19 bus drivers from 1. Recently, Uttar Pradesh SRTC announced that they would induct 5,000 women conductors. The transition to electric buses has introduced the private operator as a key stakeholder. I mean, they were there in GCC or NCC operations before, but now they're coming in a very, very big way in urban bus operations. In 22, the Convergence Energy Services Limited mandated 25% of female representation in shop floor employees, drivers, and depot staff as part of their tender for around 5,700 or 5,690 electric buses. This was subsequently reduced to 10%, and the latest tender, not latest, because we have PME Drive now, but PME Bus Seva also removed all quotas and only talks about women-friendly bus depots. I think this is something we need to explore in terms of how can we avoid the same representation in ICE systems and ensure it doesn't get replicated in electric bus systems as well. So why are we here? We are here to talk about the humble bus. It is the backbone of urban mobility in India, especially in some of the larger cities. Around 4,800 buses in city operations expected, and we need a minimum, or at least over 300,000 buses today. So we are here to learn from the experiences of multiple organizations on how they have initiated measures to include gender, but how can we move towards a policy framework for gender inclusion in public bus transport? There are multiple initiatives. What might be a coherent framework that can not only guide public bus authorities, but open up collaboration with organizations, different organizations, to achieve the same goal? With this, I would now I think I'll just take you all through the agenda. We will now have a set of 3 presentations by the Urban Catalysts, by ITDP India, and by GIZ, each of whom will present their approach and some of the work that they have done on gender-inclusive mobility. We will then have remarks by a chairperson, Professor Ines Sanchez Madriaga, who will bring international perspectives on how gender has been included in national policies. And we will then move towards a discussion with our speakers, moderated by myself and Kashmira Dubash from ITDP India, along with a Q&A towards the end. So with this, I will now hand over to my colleague Manisha, Senior Associate at the Urban Catalysts. We will introduce each speaker as we will ask questions to them. Yeah.
Thank you all for joining today, and thank you, Sonal, for setting the context. May we have the presentation, please? No, not this one. Okay. So before delving into what the policy framework includes and how we want to implement it, I want to take you through before that what all have gone into the framework, what processes, what work have gone into developing this framework. And to start with, I just want to give a very quick introduction that at the Urban Catalyst in past 8 years, we have worked in around 10 Indian states and interacted with more than 15,000 users to understand their travel experience, their lived experiences of public buses and other modes of transportation through commuter perception survey and focus group discussions. We have done infrastructure assessment of transit infrastructure from gender and climate lens, which include bus stop, terminals, depots, and also to understand that how technology can be used to improve bus operations, and also some of the issues that we see in multiple states around buses not stopping at the bus stops. And then from the workforce front, we have also worked on developing a gender assessment framework to see how gender can be included in the workforce of public bus authorities. Moving forward, we have captured lived experiences, and we have also created gender commuter satisfaction index and done importance performance analysis to identify the priorities. Here, the commuter satisfaction index, we are adding a gender lens, that how the experiences of both men and women and other gender minorities differs. So this is an example of an important performance analysis based on the survey of more than 2,000 bus commuters in Delhi, which were done recently in June, July of 2025. And we found that the satisfaction index of women commuters are lower than men. And the key priorities that came up, that infrastructure at the bus stops. So considering the heat, people are demanding that there needs to be a shelter and seating to comfortably wait for the bus till it arrives. The information, when the bus is going to arrive and which buses I can take from the bus stops, and also amenities such as toilets and water. Then the second is frequency of buses, which will have direct impact on the waiting time, and grievance redressal mechanism on how commuter can reach out to the bus authorities to give their feedback and also demand for better services if they have. Next. We created a gender-responsive bus stop audit tool, and what we did is this, we created in line with both national and international guidelines and pilot tested in 2 different cities in India. And then we looked at bus stop from comfort, accessibility, information, and personal safety parameters. And the attribute under these parameters were prioritized based on the experience of more than 17 international experts, based on which we developed a scoring matrix which can now allow us to assess bus stops and also identify the key action points that needs to be improved to improve the user's experiences. Next. A quick snapshots, what we found in different cities of Ahmedabad and Delhi, that bus stop design, if you see, and the quality differs across the city significantly. Bus stop lacks clear information, route maps, origin destination details, as well real-time information on bus arrival is required, which is currently not there in many cities. Then the existing shelter failed to give sufficient protection from heat and adverse weather. And we also need more amenities such as seating and lighting, especially in the dark time, in the night. From the workforce front, we developed a gender assessment framework for public bus transport workforce. And this is more to how we can create more opportunities for women to enter into the transport workforce and also to grow and reach to at the leadership level. We had 4 pillars that we looked, and it was based on multiple international framework that already exist, but we have contextualized in India's bus transport authority so they can look at it, assess their organization from the gender perspective, and then identify where they need to take action. There are 4 pillars in this. We have organization commitment and policy, recruitment and outreach, physical infrastructure, retention and career advancement, which will give us scoring from 100, and we can know which pillar we need to work on to mainstream gender and get more women in the employment sector of transport. Now, developing the framework, we looked at both national and international case studies. In India, at the bus transport authority level, as Sonal has mentioned, multiple interventions have been taken, but currently there's no specific policy per se. But at the state level, we have multiple states have their national policies for women, such as Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu, Kerala, Odisha, they have. But transport is included in that, not specifically public transport. We also looked at international case studies, and that also differs, the framework that they have adopted. So for example, in Chile and Sweden, these are national level policies for gender inclusion in the transport. And Bogota is at city level, but it is more of a cross-sectoral policy, not specific to transport, but one of the section is also transport. We also looked at the London, which is by the Transport for London. They don't have very specific policies, but they have legislation and rules and acts which mandate the authority to ensure that there is an inclusion of gender, disability, and other diversity inclusion. Based on that, and based on our experience, we developed this wheel of transformation we follow to increase mainstream gender in the transportation sector. The whole framework is based on the data and technology which creates the evidence, and the petals and the spokes that you see are the entry points where gender can be integrated from different entry points. For example, physical infrastructure, operations and services, employment, leadership, how we can also provide grievance redressal mechanism and procurement. And the outer circle provides how we can ensure the sustenance of these actions and institutionalize these inclusion through a gender cell, gender advisory committee, creating gender responsive budget, forging partnership and communications, and also develop capacity at all levels. Now, taking you deeper into the framework, what about data and technology? A lot of authorities already have data and technology. We also need to have a centralized data hub which collects age, gender, and disability disaggregated data, which includes ticketing data, grievances data, workforce data, also geospatial data to understand what the routes are and gets updated over the period of time. We also need to think around open data initiatives, that how the transport authorities can share the data with the third parties so that they can create services like mobile phone application to provide real-time information or other to improve the user's experience. One such example is sharing APIs. APIs is when one has to share APIs to allow users to see real-time information, which is an example. At the international level, this is around 20 to 30 seconds in transportation, TFL in London and Singapore. But in India, we see it is currently around 1 to 2 minutes. So we need to think of that as well. Coming to the physical infrastructure includes both from users and workforce lens, bus stops, terminals, buses, depots, workshop, training institutes. And this all needs, a gender assessment needs to done for all the infrastructure to understand what's the current infrastructure is and what is required to retain the female workforce that we aim to get. And based on those assessments, we can also develop the guidelines to ensure the newly developed or the upgrades are according to the framework that we've developed. This is an example of gender-responsive bus stop. What does the infrastructure look like? So the infrastructure, these have very minor details. Just wanted to give you a quick refresher. There's, for example, the back panel has to be transparent so that nobody can come from behind when you're waiting at the bus stop. Need to have information both static and real time. Lighting, need to have priority seating for caregivers. And there are other as well for safety perspective. Operations and services, when we look at, we need to use the ticketing data to inform our operations, route planning, service frequency, and scheduling. Based on that, the data we get disaggregated by gender, we can have services for women, female commuters, such as neighborhood-based short circuitous bus routes, gender-responsive or last-mile connectivity. We can also deploy women frontline or other gender frontline staff with the routes which have higher female ridership to ensure safety. Moving to grievance redressal mechanism. This is for both, very quickly. This is for both commuters and employment, need to have different reporting channels, standard operating procedures so that there is enough response time and escalation matrix, trained staff, and awareness and communication. We need to forge partnership to ensure that we bring citizen and commuters' feedback into the system, and also ensure that bus transport authorities provide adequate information to commuters. Whenever there is a new system introduced or a changes, need to do equity impact assessment so we can identify what impact it will have for the existing users or the people who want to use the bus services. Looking at the employment, we will look from the hiring, retention, and promotion leadership. To be very quick, a lot of STUs are already doing it through changing the eligibility criteria and reforms.
Hi, Manisha.
Yeah, just finishing up. Yeah, so targeting outreach, focusing on leadership so that women are there as well through mentorship programs. And we have implementation modalities like the outer circle explains. Thank you.
I will now invite Ravneet Kaur from ITDP India. Over to you, Ravneet.
Thank you, Sonal. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Ravneet Kaur from ITDP India team. I'm really, really glad to be here at UMI to share insights on our work in making India's public bus transport more gender inclusive. Yeah, so for most of us, public transport is simply a way to get from point A to point B. But for millions of women in India, it's their bridge to work, education, and opportunity. So this study conducted by ITDP India and GIZ explores what journey actually feels like a woman commuter and women employees, and what we can do it to make it more equal and safe. So to understand gender inclusive in public transport, we first need to understand how women commute. 84% of trips taken by women for work in India are by public transport, informal public transport, walk, and cycle. Women trips are very different. Women make shorter and more trips, as they make 38% shorter trips as compared to men. It's throughout the day, and from dropping children to school, picking up groceries, going to work, and what we call trip chaining. So this is why our systems need to be designed according to the complexity of their daily lives. But stepping out to travel and use public transport is not simple for women in India. Safety is the biggest concern. 56% of urban Indian women reported sexual harassment on public transport. And even before boarding a bus, many have to walk through dark or broken stretches just to reach a bus stop. So the real inclusivity begins when the question no longer needs to be asked, is the street safe to walk, or how will I get home after dark? But there is another gap which lies behind the wheel, and this brings us to a deeper issue, that is representation of women in public transport. Women are still largely missing from India's public transport workforce. In 2024, 0.16% of women drivers and 15% of conductors were in public transport workforce, a stark indicator of gender imbalance. Public transport is mainly a very male-dominated field. Therefore, it often fails to accommodate the basic needs of women, such as clean toilets, well-lit depot, or waiting rooms. But when women help design and operate the system, everything changes, from how safety is prioritized to how passengers are treated. Empathy becomes a part of design. ITDP India, in collaboration with GIZ, collaborated with GIZ to understand experiences of women both as commuters and as women employees, and to increase the participation in public transport. So we conducted a survey in 46 cities with 78,000 women commuters through our Transport for All challenge in collaboration with Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs. We also collaborated with ASRTU and conducted 4 focus group discussions with 75 women drivers and conductors in Delhi, Pune, Bangalore, and Chennai. Detailed case studies were also conducted in Hubli, Dharwad, and Bhubaneswar, marking this as the first pan-India study. Through our challenges, each story was very heartfelt and genuine, showing both struggle and pride. So the first challenge, many women employees told us they have been on temporary contract for years now. Their shift timings are irregular. They often report at 5 a.m., but their duty starts when their shift begins. They have to wait for long hours before assigned a shift. They face daily bias from male colleagues and male passengers. Long hours of standing and vehicle vibration are causing health problems with no healthcare benefit provided. And yet, most said they stay because of pride and purpose the job gives them. Many depots don't have clean toilets, safe resting areas, or proper changing rooms. One woman conductor said, there are no toilets at most bus stops. We must have to wait until the end of our shift to use the toilet. However, some drivers mentioned introduction of electric buses has been relief for them. it's much easier to drive. So these are not small inconveniences for women employees. They are daily barriers, and this should not be a job requirement for them. And women commuters also shared similar struggles. 30% of women experience harassment on while waiting for public transport. 32% reported long waiting times and unreliable services, and even affordability matters. 10% said fares were too high. 41% of women flagged overcrowding as a major issue, making their travel unsafe. 12% mentioned stations and vehicles were also very dirty. So gender inclusivity is not just only about adding more buses, it's about rethinking how safe and accessible every part of journey feels. But it's not all challenges. There are stories of hope too. One woman conductor said it feels good when passenger says, I'm doing a great job. One woman driver said, I love wearing a uniform and my colleagues have become like a second family. So how do we build a systems that work for everyone, for women employees and for women commuters? The first is to ensure fair pay, permanent contract with medical benefits, gender-specific toilets, aim for 50% of women in leadership roles, gender-sensitive policies, and enforce anti-harassment and anti-discrimination policies. The second is to have safe, inclusive infrastructure and services, CCTV cameras, lighting, panic buttons, clean toilets, build low-floor buses, and meet Mahua's benchmark, and reserve 35% for women's seats, optimize routes to reduce the waiting times, improve pedestrian and station infrastructure, and have real-time information. The third is to have gender-aware planning, integrate gender sensitivity into annual staff training, showcase women in diverse transport roles, ensure representation in committee and advisory board, collect gender disaggregated data, and allocate dedicated gender budget. So before I end the presentation and say thank you, there is one good news. The shift has already started. States like Delhi and Punjab offer free bus travel for women. Delhi has also rolled out around 3,000 low-floor buses in 2010, and international cities like Bogota operate with 60% of women drivers. So these examples prove change is possible when inclusion becomes intentional, not optional. And the goal is not just more buses or better roads, is to have a journey where every woman feels she belongs. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'll now invite Krishna Desai, Technical Advisor, GIZ India, for your presentation, please.
Thank you, Sonal. Good evening, everyone. I'm Krishna. I'm Technical Advisor for the Sustainable Urban Mobility Project of GIZ. So as part of the project, we had conducted transit infrastructure audit and review of workplace policies in Bhubaneswar and Hubli Dharwad. I know Sonal and Ravneet has covered, and Manisha have covered quite some points over here, but these are few of the findings that I would quickly like to go through and present over here, and maybe these can also be a few of the things that the panelists can keep in mind while answering their questions. So I'll skip the scope and objective, but just to give a perspective, basically we had undertaken the transit infrastructure audit of 2 depots, 2 terminals, and 4 bus stops in the city of Bhubaneswar. We had also undertaken commuter survey. Around 50 passengers were surveyed in the terminals to come up with, to identify the key issues and challenges that women face as commuters. And apart from this, we had also undertaken key informant interviews with the women working at the depots and the terminals to identify the issues and challenges in the workplace policies and the grievance redressal mechanisms. So these were the audit locations. so the methodology I have, so basically in the methodology, the focus group discussions were conducted with women, informal workers, PWDs and transgenders as well. Key informant interviews were conducted with the women working at terminals and depots. And while reviewing the workplace policies and analysis of the internal complaint mechanisms and the POSH policies were also looked into. So when we had undertaken the infrastructure audit and based on the commuter perception survey, the issues that were identified, they could broadly be categorized into safety, inclusive infrastructure, accessibility, and service gaps. So in terms of safety, it was found that generally most of these infrastructure systems lacked surveillance infrastructure. There was a lack of emergency response system as well. In terms of inclusive infrastructure, we saw that the lighting was very poor. Of course, then the washroom, I think, was one of the biggest issue that was found, and there was also a lack of childcare facilities. In terms of accessibility, there is a lack of universal design features. Footpaths were generally found to be obstructed by vendors, autos. Also, the drinking water facilities and toilet facilities were generally found to be inaccessible. In terms of service gaps, the staff behavior in few of the cases were found to be rude. Overcrowding was also found to be an issue, and long waiting time at the bus stops was found to be one of the issues which led women to choose other modes of transport, which are generally found to be expensive and unaffordable to them. So here are a few examples. So although in most of the buses, CCTV cameras are found, but then it was generally found that the monitoring system was mostly non-functional. The operators did not know, how to get hold that if the camera is working or not working. Generally, the conductors and drivers also did not know that if they had to investigate a particular case, how to do it. 94% of the women who were interviewed, they said that they felt safe on buses during the day, but when we talk about the evening, the travel inside the bus and walking to the bus stops was generally found to be a little not that safe for them, especially while walking to the bus stops. When we talk about emergency response systems, there were no panic buttons to be found in the buses. There was no safety feature at the bus stop. There was no system in place for the passenger to call for any support in case of any emergencies. We also found that 22% of the women faced verbal harassment, 18% faced theft, and 16% of the women had reported issues of stalking. Overcrowding was found that, in 9 out of 10 buses faced overcrowding. Apart from this, we also found that the lighting infrastructure was unevenly distributed in the city. While the major roads had proper lighting systems, the internal roads and the transit areas did not have proper lighting. Basic sanitary infrastructure was missing at terminals. There were no clean washrooms at the bus and terminals, and the toilets were generally found to be inaccessible. The first and last mile connectivity is generally found to be, a little expensive and unreliable. Further, it was also found that there was no proper pick and drop facilities at one of the terminal that was audited. We also found that the footpaths are generally encroached by vendors and by autos. The crosswalk was missing. The ramps are generally encroached. Plus, there is no facilities for disabled people. When we look at the workplace policies, again, these were categorized under the aspects of safety, infrastructure, accessibility, and policy gaps. We found that there were no cameras, or the women staff generally were felt unsafe while working in these areas. Inclusive, when we talk about infrastructure, it lagged. The infrastructure generally missed gender inclusive staff facilities. The washroom was again a problem for the employees as well. In terms of accessibility, there was a lack of accessible features in staff work for the staff areas. And when we look at the policy gaps, the general awareness about the internal complaint mechanisms was generally found to be absent. There was no established policies for paid leaves or flexible leave system, especially during menstruation. Apart from this, when we look at training and capacity building, especially for soft skills and grievance mechanisms for the staff, these were found to be missing. So when the interviews were conducted with the women employees, we found that they were generally not aware about the internal complaint committees. Plus, it was also found that when they generally used to have harassment issues, especially when they were collecting tickets in the buses. However, they did not know that, how to tackle these kind of issues. So these were some of the workplace level findings also, and I think we can pose these questions to the panelists also when we go forward. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. We'll now move from Indian experiences to global experiences, and would really appreciate hearing from Professor Ines. Over to you, please.
Thank you. Should I use this one? Or maybe this is not working. Oh, I don't. Is this working? Yes. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the invitation to the GIZ and to all the others, to the ITP and Catalysts for inviting me to be here. First of all, I would like to say that it's very clear from the presentations, the excellent presentations that we have heard, that there's a very clear understanding here in India of the gender differences in the city and the gender differences in the use of transportation, and how key addressing these differences is for improving women's accessibility to employment and also for economic development as a consequence, taking into consideration also the low current participation of women in the labor force, particularly in the urban environment. So addressing transportation is key so that women can better perform during the day all these tasks needed for daily life, for the reproduction of life, and hence for the reproduction of society, that are the base, so that then the economy can work. And because there are such important gender segregating patterns, this is key for women to be able to access employment in ways that if transportation better addresses care tasks and the way this implies the movements that women have to do in the city, all these tasks can be performed more easily, with less effort, in less time, with less economic cost. We have seen these many differences and the many experiences, and let me summarize the key issues that have been mentioned and are the key issues to address in gender and transport. First is the data. You have to get the data right. You have to get sex disaggregated data, and you also have to get gender indicators, which is not the same. Because, for instance, the idea of mobility of care, which is an umbrella concept that I developed a few years ago, it's a gender indicator. It shows that it's women who perform these tasks, because most care trips are done by women, but it points to the care-related trips, whether it's men or women who perform them. So it's a gender indicator. So when data are collected, it's very important to disaggregate them by sex, but also to have them include gender indicators, and of course to avoid gender biases and gender omissions that have to be looked at. So the issue of data is like a basic thing, and data needs to be to go hand in hand with more qualitative data that, as we have seen in the presentations, demonstrate what's the materiality of the gender differences. So this other sort of qualitative information is very, very important. Then we have heard about the design of stops, of stations too, because as we have heard during the conference, transit-oriented development, we need to address the small scale with the regional scale that is addressed by mass transit. And because employment jobs are not in the neighborhoods, they are not close to the home. You cannot solve the issue of access to jobs only in the small scale if you don't link the transportation of the small scale with the transportation at the regional scale through transit. So the issue of addressing the design of stops has to also address the design of train stations as metro and so on is developed, and this interlink with the micro-mobility and the mass mobility that transit provides is key. Even if when we talk about gender, we tend to look at the small scale, but that's a mistake. And that's one of the important points I want to make today, because the conference is also about the big scale of transit-oriented development. This is key for women. We don't have to forget that. Many people working on gender forget about the regional scale. So that's, and then here, particularly in India, for me, I remember when I came last year, it was very difficult for me to cross the street. I didn't dare to cross the street. So the issue of public space it's basic, and it may look like it's for everyone, but it's particularly for women, first and last mile, and the way the stops are integrated in this public space with all the very nicely designed features that we have just heard of. So let me go to some experiences. We have heard about the Rolita in Bogota. I visited it last month precisely, and there's an important thing that I think is relevant to this particular case, and it's the issue of transferability across context. Rolita is a very special initiative because it belongs to the only set of buses that is public in Bogota. Bogota, it's all the buses are private companies, except Transmillennium. And La Rolita is a small new fleet of electric buses that belongs to Transmillennium, so it's publicly owned. The only one, and it's very small, and it's all, the drivers are women, and they have all this set of wonderful policies to facilitate women's integration and targeting women who were in very difficult personal situations. So it's a very strong social policy embedded into it. But I wonder how transferable this experience can be to the huge Indian public bus operators. I don't know how this very particular experience of course, I'm sure there can be some transferability, but it has to be looked at taking into account these very specific circumstances. Let me just show you like a list of experience. In Spain, we have, since the year 2007, a very, very systematic and important legislation on gender equality. This legislation covers all the sectors of public life, all the sectors of activity, public and private, from education to health to urban infrastructure to housing, everything. And as would relate to the transport sector, it covers the obligation for private companies to have gender equality plans. It's compulsory that private companies have gender equality plans. For public institutions, they have to have gender equality units, gender equality plans, and all pieces of legislation and the budgets of the governments have to have a gender impact assessment by law. And also gender quotas in decision-making positions and in high-level technical positions and in decision bodies. So this is like a framework, regulatory framework that we have in Spain. And in the also public procurement, mechanisms to include better participation of women or certain requirements in the public procurement on gender criteria and participation of women in the companies that aim at getting these public contracts. And one example of specifically in the transportation sector is the example of the national railway provider. It's called ADIF. It belongs to the Ministry of Public of Transportation. And this was my initiative. I met one high-level decision maker 6 years ago, and I told him, you have to do something about gender. and you should do, you could do. And he said yes, and so we did for them 3 pilot projects for the design, to getting gender criteria and to participate in the design of 3 high-speed train stations. One, a big city, San Sebastián in Basque Country, another in a mid-sized city, another in a rural area. The train stations and the sections of the railways that would go in the surface in an urban environment. So we did these 3 pilots, and from that we extracted a number of criteria, and they put those into public procurement. And in just 5 years, these criteria have come out in all the projects or renovations, extensions, new projects of all train stations in the country. That's over 300 that have been developed in these 5 years. So this is one example of from pilot to scale, using public procurement as a mechanism, accompanied with tools, manuals that explain the people who participate in the process on how this is done. Then, for the Ministry of Public Works, we did their gender equality plan and the of transportation and urban affairs, their gender equality plan. And this gender equality plan addresses both the participation of women in the labor force of the ministry and all its corporations and in autonomous organisms, which is a lot because it's a huge ministry. Gender equality plan for the professions regulated by the ministry, which is engineering, architecture, astronomers, and others. And gender equality also for the substantive policies of the ministry. So gender equality plan across all these 3 areas of relevant to the action of the ministry. Then just because I have to finish, another interesting experience in Spain in the transportation field is the province of Gipuzkoa in the north. They have what I think probably is the most interesting pricing policy in transportation, which covers municipal buses, interurban buses, the metro systems of nearby big cities in nearby provinces, and the national train system, all under one card, that the more you travel using public transportation, the less you pay. And if you, because this is linked with your personal data through a system that you have to agree, but then the less you pay if you belong to certain social groups that have certain traits. So this has a very, very positive gender, social, but particularly gender impact. So I will finish here, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ines, for sharing very practical and implementation-oriented examples that you have been part of in Spain. I will now hand over to Kashmira. Over to you.
Hello. All right. Hi. Good evening, everyone. I am Kashmira Debash from ITDP India. I'll start off with a very short story. So a few days back, I was talking to Avni ma'am about the new free Bus for Women scheme that Jammu and Kashmir have recently launched, and I'm sure she'll talk a lot about it in detail soon. But there was a story that she told me that really stuck with me. So she mentioned that after the scheme was launched, there was a husband who apparently said that now I need to be very careful when I have a fight with my wife, because I know she can now pack her bag take the bus, and leave. Now, I really hope that none of us feel the need to leave our families, but the heart of the story was that this woman, this wife, let's call her Vaishali, okay, for the context of this story. Let's call her Vaishali. The fact that Vaishali had the freedom to make her own choice. Vaishali had that choice to basically move in the city the way she wanted to on her own terms. Now, to me, that's empowerment in its true sense. And we're here today to hear from the experts, so I won't take much of your time. But I really hope that, when we leave this door at, it looks like 6:30 now, when we leave the door, we don't walk out thinking, I learned something new at UMI. I hope that's not the takeaway. But I hope that when we step out, each of us, whether we are a bureaucrat, an expert, a business owner, whoever we are, in our own capacity, if we can ask ourselves, what can I do to make sure that I can empower thousands more Vaishalis? Because I'm sure all of us have the power in this room to do our bit to make gender an integral part of our public transport. So, without any further ado, I would like to ask my first question to Ms. Pamela Beigel, the Deputy Head of Economic Cooperation and Development, Embassy of Germany. Now, Pamela, Germany has been very strong global advocate for gender equality and sustainable mobility. Now, given your experience with economic cooperation and development initiatives, in your perspective, how do you think international partnerships, like for example, between Germany and India, how do you think these partnerships can actually help us scale gender inclusivity in urban solutions? And more importantly, if you could share 3 key takeaways from Germany's experience, something that can be effectively adapted in the Indian context. I understand that the Indian context is very, very different to Germany, but we need some inspiration to get better at this. Over to you, Pamela.
Yeah, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. Pamela Beigel from the German Embassy. So let me first of all acknowledge that it is really impressive to have witnessed from a distance, but now in Delhi myself, this remarkable transformation that India, especially Indian cities, have undergone. And I really feel that this urban growth story that is now happening and will be continue to happen for the next decades is first and foremost a lot of opportunities. And because cities are at the heart of every transformation, and when we can transform our cities, we have achieved much more than if we only focus on other aspects. So India and Germany, they can look back to a very long-standing, close and trustful cooperation across sectors, and important progress has been achieved. And to some of you might be very familiar that we have early on also started our engagement in sustainable urban development, because we have early on realized that for an inclusive social and economic development, we need to focus on the cities. And to consolidate and further scale up our engagement, we have our Honorable Prime Minister Modi and Chancellor Scholz have launched the Green and Sustainable Development Partnership. And one of the key partnerships under this GSTP is the Indo-German Green Urban Mobility Partnership that has been very much our umbrella in the mobility engagement. And when it comes to gender inclusive mobility, we really feel we are very much welcoming India's embrace, and we have heard a lot about it, and I'm super impressed about what also Ines said, that there's so much awareness, so much expertise and knowledge about gender inclusiveness and how we can incorporate it. And Germany we very much welcome and embrace that. We very much want to work on this. My team knows this very well. I'm just pestering them all the time about the gender inclusiveness. Because in my eyes, it's not just about fairness, it's simply smart economics. Because if you include the woman, you gain also economically. So when we talk about Germany, I first need to really make clear we also face similar challenges in Germany. We also face harassment due to inadequate lighting, unsafe waiting areas, and poor first and last mile connectivity. And we also lack a gender lens or accessibility considerations in planning and implementation. But, and also our systems are largely designed for men rather than women. And of course, women have totally different needs, what we have also extensively heard. And so we are at the same, in the same boat, but probably our figures are a bit better than in India in terms of representation. We have more women included in the planning and implementation, and that's what we also learned in our own institution. So when this whole gender inclusiveness came up in the last decade once again, because it has been very much core aspect of the development cooperation ever since, but because of this climate change and climate action focus, we have somehow a little bit neglected the gender lens. And then when we refocused on it, we really felt we have to upgrade all our approaches, and we need to strengthen the rights and representation and resources of all vulnerable groups. We have to build international alliances and work systematically with civil societies that focus on these groups. And we have to really very much also look at our own structures and skills. Where do we stand? What is our competence as a person and as a planner and as a decision maker? Do we have a gender lens? And how can we include this gender inclusion across our portfolio? So we learned we should not think in silos. We should just really establish it as a cross-cutting issue once again, because it has been already there. So our three key learnings, what I feel from my experience in India and in urban mobility in India, comparing it to the German dimensions, I would say one of the key aspects is really to have a mandatory legal foundation. Make it mandatory, not optional. Make it not voluntarily, just make it mandatory. It is not ending there, because we have to implement our legal foundation. Our law has to be implemented, and we have challenges to implement it. Sometimes it's not implemented, although it's mandatory. But it's a good starting point. But it's not the end. What I really also realized, what really makes a difference, is to have dedicated units in each institution at each level, give them real authority, give them a budget, and give them a coordinating role. It's not about only one ministry which is focusing on women and family. It's about every institution at every level that needs to have this gender lens and this accessibility lens. And only then, and give them authority, which is so, it should not be only for symbolic reasons, but it should be really for, changing, they should be able to change also the course of the debate. But they are struggling also in Germany. But then leave it not only as focal points which have a mandate, which have a budget, but also establish networks, connect all these focal points, make them share their experiences, their best practices, what has worked, what has not worked. I think this made a big difference because this really incorporated this gender lens across the public debate. It was very much, it is very much part of life, although some people feel like, oh, not once again about gender, but it's very much part of our reality, and we also have learned a lot. And the third part, let me say two more aspects, because I got inspired by something that my fellow speakers told me, the workforce. I already mentioned it. When you have women, I'm not speaking only as a government official to you today, I'm speaking as a commuter myself. I'm a passionate public transport user, and I really think we need to incorporate that lens of a public transport user ourselves. What is our experience? When do I feel safe? When it, for instance, what has not been mentioned, vibrant areas. I feel safe when there are lights, when there's females, other women around, but also families, when there are shops, when it's just not a dead place, but a vibrant place. So I think bring our own experience and make sure that when we design and plan and coordinate and implement, that we have this lived experience as a commuter incorporated, but not only as a woman commuter, but also as an elderly person, or as a child, or as a transgender. Just try to incorporate all these lenses in our planning by adequate representation. And my last point is, I think Ines or someone talked about the ticketing. What we have now experienced, I don't know whether you have learned, in Germany we have the Deutschlandkarte. It's the Germany card, and I love it. And it's subsidized by companies and institutions, so you get it a little bit cheaper, and you are allowed to use the public transport system through across Germany. So you don't have to border, you just pay this monthly fee, and then you are allowed to go to on any bus, on any train, and this makes a tremendous difference. So I leave it here, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Pamela. I think one very important point that you made was that every institution at every level needs to have a gender lens. And at this point, I would like to segue and bring in Mr. Surya Kiran, the ex-ED of ASRTU. Sir, you've been in the institution, you've been in the ecosystem at the national level. So from your perspective, and one thing is, you've been our champion as well. With the study that we were able to do, it was under your guidance. So, personally and on behalf of ITDP, I would like to say a big thank you. But on that point, would love to understand that what is the role of a national institution, but what is also the role of a state-level institution to make sure that public transport is gender inclusive? We have the national head. We've got a sub-national, and then we've got the city. But we need the three to talk to one another. How do we make sure that actually happens? And what is their role in making gender inclusive?
To begin with, public bus transport is more or less a state subject, though it's put it in concrete list, but implementation part of anything is a state subject. The buses are literally run by states, concerned states in the country. And central government forms laws, rules, regulations, so that uniformity is maintained in the country. As far as laws, rules, and regulations are formed, and they're mostly followed, as long as it's a statute, all the states keep following it. There are some exemptions, but still we can ignore them. But every aspect cannot be made into a statute. Say, women empowerment, as of today, I'm telling you. Maybe in future things will get better on, But as of today, certain topics, like, for example, I'll just draw an example for you, disability, accessibility in public bus transport. Till now, government actually could not make it a statute. So they've been giving guidelines to be followed, how a bus station should be constructed, and how for a disabled person or a physically challenged person to have access across the bus stations, buses, low-flow buses we try to bring in, but all the public transport organizations in the state have accepted it, and they still run the same buses with larger height, I mean, bigger, this thing. So when you look at the statute, no, mostly guidelines can be given. But in other ways, like ASRTU is there. This is the organization is the apex body of all the state and transport undertakings. We all can, with say, academicians, with organizations like you, we can build some SOPs, we can build some guidelines for add some best practices within it, and then circulate it to all the states to bring in some parity. Example, a state like Andhra Pradesh, state like Telangana, they have mandated 33% reservations in public bus transport, employment. There you see conductors, huge number of conductors coming in. In 96, when I was there I was working there, it was a hell broke loose when people said conductors being recruited into bus transport. Anybody who has seen a city bus, literally speaking, a woman walking in and conducting the bus is virtually an impossible thing. If anybody has seen it. When most of the states, now free buses are provided in southern states in Delhi, 120 people board the bus and the woman conductor is expected to issue tickets to at least 40 of them who are men. Physically harrowing experience. But still in 96, when we opened the channels of 33% reservation, huge number of women came in. Now you see, out of 18,000 in the country, a large number of women are there where reservation is provided. Otherwise, there are only 3 or 4, 5 states which have large number. When we are calling 17%, I mean, it's just 4 or 5 states having that percentage, not the others. The others, you have 10s, 20s, which are compassionate appointments where, husband dies and the woman is somehow brought in and given. But we also conducted a study, just give you information, we conducted a study whether they really, after 96, between 96 and 2005, we conducted a study saying that whether they really lived up to the expectations of the management bringing women conductors into the system. The attendance was seen, the performance was seen, the revenue earnings has been seen, fantastic. They have done better than men, to tell you honestly. Their percentage of regularity is much higher than the men. Absenteeism is a chronic issue in public bus transport, but women proved otherwise. But still you see the other pockets in the state, because again the state governments have not mandated. They have not taken. And where 33% mandate is done in public bus transport, but still not a single driver is existing in some of these states if you look at it. And all the vacancies are still kept vacant in these states for drivers, because women are not coming forward. That's another issue to look at it actually. If now central government comes up, not as a policy, if bring up a scheme saying that employ women drivers, train them, give free training to them, employ women drivers, give them some incentives, well, you see, there could be some change. There are 290 women drivers in how many? 4 lakh drivers in the country now. That's where policy level guidelines or maybe incentivize schemes bring in to make it more inclusive employment in public bus transport. State governments have to take initiative to go in. As I was saying, states like Karnataka, states like Telangana, when made it mandatory, you see many officers coming in, supervisors coming in, technical experts coming in. You see huge difference in the facade of public bus transport in those states. So yes, national level bodies should come up with best practices, guidelines or SOPs, and then start circulating them within the states so that the other states realize that this employment is giving a benefit to their corporations. Then they'll be increasing. And the state governments have to make laws to really get things done and implemented.
Thank you. Thank you very much, sir. I think your point on the state's role is extremely crucial, and I think one state that has been rather progressive has been Tamil Nadu with its free bus scheme for women. And at another level, at the city level, is where I would like to bring in Dr. T. Prabhushankar, MTC, MD. Sir, this year, I think, has been a momentous year for Chennai, especially with its electric bus fleet being inaugurated. And I was lucky enough to be at the launch. Now, when I went back home and I was going over my photographs, I had one or two pictures of the beautiful electric buses, but 80% of my photos were of the women conductors and drivers who were present on that day. They had beautiful smiles, and I think all of us, we were taking selfies with them, and it was lovely. As a Chennaiite, I had my very proud moment, so thank you. So just want to understand, how has MTC ensured that women are not only part of the workforce now, especially given its transition to electric fleet, but Chennai has also been doing great stuff in ensuring that women as commuters feel safe. Could you draw a little bit on that journey? But more importantly, how will you make sure that this effort is sustained, not in the short term, not in the medium term, but in the long run?
Good evening, everyone. So it's been an enlightening session so far, especially the gender parity here, because it's like there is among the few sessions where there's the representation is it's so nice to see, and so we really have to be honest in our views. We can't really escape. So yes, when I came into the room, I just thought I'll kind of brag about the things that our state is doing. But having seen the presentations that rather tell us the real story, the flip side of it, we really need to take our achievements with a pinch of salt. Yes, we have done a lot of things, but then as a representative of my state, I'll really also try to tell what we've been trying to do, rather, because it's always a journey. I would say yes, like most states, we do have a free concession scheme for women, wherein the travel for women is free without showing any ID card. It's a very seamless, it's just any woman who takes a bus, especially a city bus or a town bus, is literally can travel without having to pay anything from her pocket. And we have a study which has been done by the State Planning Commission, which has showed that it saves a woman, a household of at least 1,000 to 1,500 rupees. Every household ends up saving. So when it comes to women empowerment, this is real women empowerment. So we need to really look at a transport department as not just vehicles of physical mobility, but those of vehicle of social mobility. So, and we have the stakeholders are not just the commuters. So when it comes to commuters, I think many state governments, including Tamil Nadu, have done wonderfully well, or at least trying to do a lot of things. And the illustrations like Vidiyal Payanam scheme is one, and we have a scheme like where a 25 kg luggage is free for the members of the women self-help groups. So that's a scheme that's been launched this year in Tamil Nadu. So we have we have lady special services because we also need that the women need to have a safe travel. So we have, at least during the peak hours, we operate services that are exclusively for women. And recently we launched services for school students. That is, government schools getting exclusive school buses. MTC has launched it. We have done a lot of things, and the last mile connectivity, because there's a lot of talk. The buses are really a pleasant sight to watch, but Chennai is one place where we have been having small buses, buses of 7 meter for more than 12 years now. So this last mile connectivity has really empowered women. Let's say a vegetable vendor or a small, it's a domestic help, living in the interior of a neighborhood, traveling to the main road. So we have literally empowered those things. So this has always been a journey, and it's always been the principles that has governed how government of Tamil Nadu has addressed or used transport as a vehicle of social mobility and women empowerment in particular. When it comes to the other aspect, when it comes to this as a tool of empowering women, I fondly remember Women's Day, celebrating Women's Day in my organization, like we all do. So March 8th, we all come together, and it's all women, and we all salute womanhood. And so when you find what exactly is the nature of the designation of women in the organization, it's all at either the executive. So my chief financial officer is a lady officer. I have my a senior deputy manager who's HRD, who's a lady officer, and people who are literally at the top posts, and all the people who in the offices. So I had to jokingly cover it up saying, women are more qualified than women, so you end up in the white collar jobs, leaving the blue collar jobs to the men. So, but that is a very optimistic view of it. But rather, the other side of it is that, yes, we have really never looked at as women across filling the entire hierarchy. But right now, and I'm so glad, in fact, I'm really enlightened by views of Surya sir as to how a mere statute alone cannot bring a change. We really need to ensure it's a journey, like, because it's a transport and mobility, it's a journey, but we need to start somewhere. Yes, how do we start? Yes, we need to create small islands of excellence. Like, we really have to constantly endeavor. Just a case in point, we have tried to reduce the height, the qualification from what should be an 160 centimeter to 150 centimeter to enable women to be employed in the transport department. Likewise, these small initiatives need to be continuously done. But ultimately, what happens is, yes, we have photos which will tell women conductors standing, like you just said, yes, these are wonderful achievements, but we really need to keep up the momentum. And how do you achieve it? We really need to skill them. As sir rightly said, it's not just a statute wherein a wonderful illustration is, I think our state has, like most states, we have a reservation for women in the representation when it comes to local bodies. In fact, in our state, 50% is reserved for women in the panchayat presidents or the mayors. But what is the field reality? You will find their spouses acting as the presidents. But at least in this case, their husbands cannot ply the bus for them. So this is a wonderful opportunity for us where skilling can really bring about a change in the empowerment, and it will be empowerment with dignity. So we all talk about women empowerment as it is a dole out. When I look at transport department as a vehicle of social mobility, as a beneficiary, it is more like we giving a service to women. No, it's not the case. Because the theme for this year's Women's Day is rights, equality, and empowerment. So we need to look at it as empowerment with dignity. And how do we achieve it? Only when across the hierarchy, you have women working, and not just a small percentage. They really need to work as a critical mass. You cannot have 2% or 10% women working. So, and then how it happens, we need to skill. So skilling is one very valuable, we need to really, as sir rightly pointed out, we need to come out with a scheme, and more than ever, this is an opportunity. When our procurement, or sorry, for that matter, our recruitment is going towards GCC models like where we are engaging with the public-private partnership models, where the jobs have become more and more informal, there's a huge requirement, especially I can very much vouch for it as an operator in Chennai. We have a huge requirement. We don't have people, we have a manpower shortage for flying buses, and that is where women can step in. And technology, the electric vehicles, the ease of operations, they offer huge opportunities. So we really need to create an ecosystem that both skills women, and as I would like to repeat saying, we need to empower them with dignity, and not just as like as men. It's not that men should be ordering what women should be eating. Rather, they should be ordering what they need. So for that, especially this is a department like transport, public transport should be literally, women should be at all levels, not just decision making, that every day where a women passenger can interact on a day-to-day basis. So I rest my case here. I think I've exceeded my brief. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much, sir. I think one statement from you has stayed: transport should be a vehicle of social mobility and not only physical mobility. Perhaps that's the takeaway for the entire session. I'll now move to Mr. Vivek Ogra, partner at Transport Ernst & Young. Vivek, the question of data, you saw it in, we had 3 presentations from 3 organizations, each of whom have collected some kind of data in order to fill this gap, right? In order to understand differences in travel and so on. how can public bus authorities use digitalization, because we know that this is something we want to move towards, to understand gender disaggregated travel behavior of users? And what are the challenges? Because digitalization has opened many avenues, especially things when you have QR code-based ticketing or non-personalized travel cards.
Thank you. I think I'll again say it has been a really enlightening session so far. You know, from IT standpoint, I remember we've been in this journey for a very, very long period of time. At least 20 years I have seen IT rollouts in India. Unfortunately, in transport ecosystem, it's a very fragmented state of affairs right now. We had 3 rounds of advisory coming from the central government. We had UBS 1, then we had UBS 2, and then we had AS 140. What has really happened is we've got data in different parts of the system, but none of those point to an aggregated source where you could really analyze and really point to a certain kind of insight and therefore deliver something meaningful. QR codes are non-personalized, so therefore you really don't understand who is traveling. Oftentimes in public transport, minus the passes that are issued, the data is just there, somebody is traveling, but we don't know when, how, why. So therefore, I think in public transport, I believe it has to be a collaboration of different sources of data that has to be brought in together. It cannot be a single source. Now, for example, when you look at ticketing data, it will provide you some sort of information in terms of when are people traveling, from where to where they are traveling. In parts of the data, you will see who is traveling. But you certainly don't find differently abled people. What kind of disability is there? You don't find that in data. Therefore, you're not able to have a purpose-led mobility for them. Second problem is, even if you have this data, there is no way today that you can extrapolate that to create value out of that data. There is no standardization of how you extrapolate that data. Interop of data itself is a problem because there are no standards that point to an interop. How do you interop? Now we also have a DPDP coming in. That's also going to amplify this problem furthermore because there is going to be cry for privacy that you cannot have this data out unless you secure, unless you have guardrails around this data. So therefore, having said that, I think there are a lot of things that we'll need to really look at. First and the foremost is, my sense is IT is always seen as an afterthought. Technology in transport is always an afterthought. It's never something which is fundamental to the design itself. The moment you have it as a fundamental to the design, so you will have contextualization of why you need technology. See, today, look at UBS 2 or AS 140, which is coming. How are we using this data? This immense amount of data that is coming in, but absolutely no usage. We don't know the transport managers, particularly. I think, the problem is also how we recruit people in our transportation ecosystem. They come from different jobs than the transportation itself, and transportation is an incidental job they're doing. So therefore, the affinity to really understand why transportation itself is missing, so the contextualization is not there. So just to make it simple, there has to be one exercise that should be done where we bring the taxonomy of the transport data itself at the central level. Now, as Surikaranji said, it's a concurrent subject. So therefore, you cannot impede into state authority in terms of how they want to operate it, but you can certainly provide guidance in terms of how data models have to evolve. I think that could be a starting point. Now, the moment you have taxonomy to the transport data, wherever it is coming from, for example, this data should also come from industries. Where are people working? Where are they going from? Where do they live? Because that has a bearing on how do you provide mobility choices to them. First mile, last mile, mid-mile interfaces, all of that will be decided depending on how industry is giving you data. Crowdsourced data. I remember many years back, there was a system in US that was developed as see something, say something. A very powerful concept of how you bring people into the discourse of the transformation itself. So in public transportation, we lack information coming to us from the people, their needs and so on and so forth. Let's say the safety itself. Why can't we have something like see something, say something, let people become part of that information network, right? We can have those syndicated platforms. Now, while you'll have so many platforms, how do you converge? So therefore, there has to be a framework of conversions which has to come in. So my sense is sensing as a start point. It could be CCTV data. It could be ticketing data. It could be curbside data. It could be any data that the city can provide, industries can provide. This is your sensing data. Then you bring analyzing data. That's where the taxonomies and metadata of transport will start playing. How do you really make sense of this data? Then you converge it into the meaningful data sets. And finally, you provide actions and insights as a service. Now, these actions and insights need to be provided to all participants. Now, you have a problem, IPT is not as enabled as the public transport system. How do you provide insight to them? Can we not provide insight to them on the platforms they are operating? They could be operating a private platform, it's okay. As long as this helps me action on the ground, which could be a gender action, it could be an action towards disability, it could be action towards how I understand the needs. For example, the apps. While we don't want people don't want us to tell there is a disability, but anonymizing data itself is a strategy. How do we anonymize? Pseudonymization of a system, differential privacy. I mean, it'll take a lot of time to go through everything, but then data encryption, user control disclosure, synthetic data generation. Once you have the patterns, you can generate an synthetic data set and start giving that to the authorities so that they can plan better. I think it's first about the framework. We don't have a framework. That is very, very important.
Thank you very much, Vivek. Ms. Avni Ravasa, ma'am, the next question is for you. And sorry for stealing your story right at the beginning. It's your story to tell. So, please do share the journey of Jammu and Kashmir coming up with a very bold decision of having a scheme that is free bus for women. But more importantly, what I would love to hear from you is how do you see state-level interventions like this shaping women's commuting patterns and the overall accessibility to opportunities? Vivek highlighted the importance of having data. So we'd love to hear from you how or whether data is being collected in this aspect and how is it further continuing to shape interventions, state-level interventions like this.
Thank you. I will just start with just setting the context about what we are doing. So the free public transport for women was started in J&K in April, 1st April 2025 of this year. And it applies to around 400 odd road transport corporation buses, and 200 buses are run in urban areas by the Smart Cities Limited. And the female ridership, if we look at last year's data, it has increased by about 25%. But at the same time, we are faced with challenges due to revenue foregone, and that's since we are now 7 months down the line, we are in a position to see certain kinds of trends and patterns. So the revenue foregone is about 2 crore rupees per year for the Road Transport Corporation and about 4.5 crores per month for the Smart Cities Limited. So now at this point, at this point, there are some arguments that sort of then start asking questions about the financial sustainability of such operations. And this I'm talking from the point of view of a state government. And a state government that may not be necessarily in the best of fiscal health. So, so these are questions that start arising down the line. The second thing is that then there are some questions now, and because we are, it's a dynamic situation. We are sort of living through this right now. Is whether it should be limited to a certain criteria, maybe an economic criteria, and should not be given to all women. So all these arguments are going on at this stage, and somehow somehow the free transportation initiative for women, the free ridership, is often looked at upon as a populist measure and something that is considered like a freebie sort of a thing, and that kind of has a negative connotation to it. Now, having said all that, I will, so the question is, for a state government that we are faced with, is free ridership for women justified? And so I will talk a bit about my personal thoughts as well, and some of it is, obviously the state will not roll it back, but there are two statistics that I want to sort of talk about. One is that women in India have only 6% of the driver's licenses that are issued, and in J&K it's even less, it's 4.7%, and this is, 4.7 is current data, the 6% is from 2023. The second thing is, in the 2011 census, for the first time, the census captured travel to work data, and 50% of India. Obviously, there'll be data limitations. There'll be how interviews have responded, whether they responded or not. But 50%. And in J&K, it's around 45% in 2011, people walk to work. So as a state government, the question is, I think it's in the realm of the government's responsibility to provide mobility options to so many of its citizens. Women, obviously, like I said, have on an average 6% of driver's licenses. But apart from that, we have very limited access, our citizens have limited access to motorized transport. So that's why public transportation is important. That's how we look at it. That's how we are looking at it, not as something done out of populism or a welfare measure, but something that is providing access to opportunities. And we all talk of economic and livelihood opportunities, but also leisure opportunities, just to do household chores and run household errands. That's equally important, and that's where I think that's how we look at it. And Kashmira, you told one story, but then there also, and so I have all these people coming in giving feedback, mostly men, about how what's happening is that they're sort of very, it's a bit condescending, and they say that, buses are filled with women, and women just sit in a bus, take a round of the entire city, and then come back and go home. And I'm like, so why not? Like that is what Prabhu referred to, social mobility and access to leisure and access, and just having that freedom to just go out, even if you want to just sit in the bus and do nothing, go nowhere, that's fine. And that's something that I think needs to be part of the narrative. It doesn't have to be just livelihood and economic opportunities. It is about having that freedom, which you spoke about as well. And finally, I will talk about the financial burden that is being imposed, and that's where I think as governments, we need to have more clarity in why we are doing this, and clearer thinking on public transport has the potential to increase access to opportunities and provide mobility as a means to provide freedom. And I think we need to be very clear about that as policymakers. As far as finances is concerned, I really do not think it's that much of a problem. It's as simple as just probably maybe increasing 3% tax on motor vehicles, as the the token tax that we levy, or we can impose a cess on motor vehicles. So that is not, but again, it requires some readjustment of policy priorities and how we look at this, and not to look at it as a dole. So with this, I'll just conclude by saying that clarity in why we are doing this is very important when it comes to public policy. Thank you.
Moving now from the public sector to the private sector, over to you, Dr. Rajni Tiwari, Chief People Officer at the Green Cell Mobility. You have about 10% of your staff who are women, and I believe also gender diverse individuals. There are a range of initiatives required to attract, retain, and advance women in the sector, but also in your organization. Based on your experience, what would you say are the 3 critical areas that have really worked?
Thank you so much. I think it's always a pleasure coming back to UMI, because I was first introduced to it by Krishna, but what really happens is it keeps your mind thinking. I always go back with thoughts, and last year when we were here, we were at 8.5%, if you remember, so we did some decent work and we've reached 10. So that is by the virtue of a lot of experiential learning and a lot of things which we take in our stride, and like Kashmira rightly said, that, you know, take back what is that change we are going to be driving in, rather than just saying that what was the very most well said thing in the podium or the conference today. So Green Cell as an organization, I think what was very imperative to our gender journey was that we started with first creating an environment. Now for a gender agenda to work per se, or a gender thought to work, it is very essential that you have the right level playing field. And the only criteria or the metric for gender inclusion is respect. Now that is something you can build in your organization. Can you really do it in external environment? The answer is yes, no, maybe. Yes, because we do a lot of Nukkar stage shows, and we do a lot of street plays, trying to tell people that why is it very important to street theater. Our EHS teams go out and they do, because they want to tell people that, you know, what it is to just basically give and take respect. Everything in the organization per se started with making policies which were gender neutral. But we did have positive pressure on gender, that it will incentivize. So we positively incentivize gender by saying that we may not be a fair pay master, and we'll pay better to women or transgenders or other genders, because we want to increase that thought process. See, we are talking about a market where it is okay for a woman to be at home. So today, to induce that spouse or the father or the brother that you come and you start, you know, let your woman work, you have to incentivize that. So it comes with a cost. You're driving a social agenda. Social agenda comes with a lot of blood and cost. Blood, because you're really racking your brains, how will you drive it? What is that you will bring to table? And cost, because like Avni rightly said, that it can bring any kind of a financial pressure, this and that. We need to also understand that what does mobility do? Mobility, not just like rightly pointed out, say for leisure, for work opportunities, for studying, student mass mobility, like why will a student use public transport? Why not being dropped by their fathers or their brothers or their mothers, or even at times? So the key to each thing, when we did our dipstick around 2 years back, when we wanted to design our path, we said education and skilling. You can't achieve this without this. What would you want people to come for? They have to be educated. They need to know why these women are traveling. And it can be with an agenda, without an agenda, like Avni rightly said. But the thing is, without an agenda, how many times will she travel? So having an agenda, whether it's education, whether it's skilling, and the government puts in a lot of impetus with NAPs, NATs. They are trying to incentivize through these schemes by saying, you take these people in your apprenticeship program in the NAPs and we will pay you back. And the website, the portal, we are big users, and I think it's fantastic. You need to first start with a belief. This is going to work. And once the belief is set in, then the trajectory is set. Second and most important thing, that when we have said that, in our own organization, how do you do this? You need to say, call a spade. Your best performing guy can be fired if there is a misbehavior. Because, like I said, respect at Green Cell cannot be negotiated with. We deal with 6,000 off-roll employees, of which 5 to 7% are women. It's a fluctuating population, off-roll population. But what happens? Even a single case of misbehavior is attended on within 24 hours. You really have to set the ball rolling by doing walk the talk. It's not permissible. We've done a lot of flexibility in terms of saying that when I had hired the first women driver in Lucknow, she said that, I love my job, but don't give me a morning shift. I need to make tiffins for my spouse and my children. But that's a fact. I am a CHRO. I do that. Talk about women empowerment. Empowerment doesn't mean you stop doing what your social cycle was doing. Empowerment means take everybody along and move around. So this thought process then kind of encouraged there. We did flexi shifts for them, for our trans staff, so that they can pursue other things. Green Cell is the only organization, and I take a lot of pride by saying that, we have all other genders in customer-facing roles. We don't shy away from that. They have to be. They can't be doing the regular jobs. And when we say we will provide opportunities in mobility, it may not be necessary only drivers or conductors. They can, like today, I have a team in battery, in supply chain, in procurement, other departments. Identify what's more safe and secure space for them to start work with, because at least you'll start the journey. And then say that, okay, now our women drivers, with we clicking on the India Book of Records and Guinness Book of Records with the first intercity bus, with complete women passengers, women driver, women cabin host, what does it happen? It has a lot of challenges. Somebody would say, the passenger looked at me like this. So we created, then we kept reinventing. We said we'll have these numbers which are there. We have a panic button which is there in the bus. We have a pink seat which is dedicated. We also give a choice to our women passengers also saying, because see, it is just not about having a lot of women coming. We have to create an environment socially that a lot of passengers also travel. Then only this whole journey will be wholesome. And third and most importantly, like I said, we are investing a lot in training. We are very cognizant of the fact that it is a lot of investment in terms of rupee value. But if I do not invest today, because in a lot of our contracts, and Prasanna sir knows about it, where they say that 3 years Heavy Motor Vehicle License Act is required. Then what do? For 3 years you'll tell her first get the license, practice and come? No, you have to create that opportunity. Maybe they just do the depot duty for some time. Maybe they just do the maintenance work for some time, and then they come to the natural course of taking the bus out. See, for us, it's safety over revenue. Can't be compromised with that I want to do or clock in a gender agenda and I compromise on safety. Because it is somebody's life which is in my hand when I take out that heavy asset vehicle. Mobility has 2 faux pas. The asset is too expensive to be experimented with. You cannot. And second and most important is, there is no scope of error. You're dealing with human lives. You're transporting them. So how do you do that? Regular trainings. The training man-hours are just too many, and we try and do over-communication. The COC, something so simple like a COC, we keep talking about it, so that they feel that in this organization, we'll be getting heard. Our MD also addresses them. So it's just flowing from the top. I think, I think my colleague Pamela also said that, when everybody is talking the same story, when it is coming from everywhere, then you will not be able to create micro organizations. You will have a macro picture with micro thought process lining in, which is a common thought process. So on that thought, yes, because For me, my basic takeaway for any gender agenda on any forum or any industry, I have worked with virtually a lot of labor-intensive industries, I always say it's education and skilling. You have to first give them that platform. No, opportunity will come only with talent. Can't compromise there. Thanks.
Thank you. Some very, very key takeaways that you've mentioned. One is safety is priority. Education and skilling, so please create those opportunities. How do you negotiate some difficult requirements, especially when we say heavy passenger vehicles? What do you do in order to become eligible to drive that? And constant emphasizing of the code of conduct and, like you said, over-communication. I'll now come to Mr. Prasanna Patwardhan. He is the CEO of Prasanna Purple Mobility Solutions Private Limited and the president of Boki. And I told him the champion of this session. So we have spoken a little bit about electric buses and the role and the key role of the private sector now in employing staff, but also employing women. What can we do, given, we know the issues, what can we do to attract and retain women at scale? Because we may not love quotas, but it seems that sometimes quotas work. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Before I go to that specific questions, most of the things are already being said, so I will not repeat that. But I think this subject has to be divided into two parts. One part is as a consumer, women as a consumer, what we can do. And second, women as an employee, what we can do. Whatever is required for women as a consumer, I will give you 2-3 examples what we have done. First is in public transport, in city buses. In Indore, there is a system that in front of center door, all women are accommodated, and behind the center door, all men are accommodated. So they are separated like bogies, different bogies in a bus. So that is one example which is already being implemented in Indore. Secondly, on our intercity coaches, we allocate seat next to ladies, only ladies seat. So we do not accommodate a male passenger next to ladies seat. So that is also one of the example I can state. One of the example which actually Pune started in city bus as a pink bus, separate bus for women. But unfortunately, after that, they converted to family bus. So even men with women can go in the bus. So taking inspiration from that, we had started a long distance coach on same principle. But that also, unfortunately, for economic reason, we had to convert that to a family kind of a bus. Because you don't get those many number of women. In Delhi, we were operating metro feeder services. We had to close down our metro feeder services in Delhi in 2019 because women were offered free in government buses, and in private that cannot be done because we don't get any subsidy, we don't get anything for our survival also. So for people sitting on my right, that is possible, but for our members that is just impossible. So one of the things which we must understand that in private sector, it is very unorganized sector. Though we have more than about 25,000 members, operate about around 20 lakh buses, which is 93% of total bus population. But more than 90% of the people own less than 10 buses. So whatever probably Greensill also can afford, they cannot afford. So for them, economic survival is on top, and next to that everything comes. So unless that changes and it becomes more corporatized, more organized, this thing will not happen. But still, in most of the private buses, which are long distance coaches, you will find a principle of only women next to women is followed. Particularly night services, 100% followed. But day services, probably not everybody follows it. When it comes to employment, let me give you example of my own company, and then I will take it to general buses. In our school buses, 100% attendant is lady attendant. So I employ 260 ladies as lady attendants in school buses in my own company. In India, there will be around more than 5 lakh school buses, which means at least more than 1 lakh lady attendant will be there on schools. So that is a bigger opportunity. We are searching, and we talk to those women also, that there is a great opportunity in school buses, particularly for women, because school buses day driving is not more than 2-3 hours. Morning they can complete their shift before 7:30 or 8 o'clock. They can go home, do whatever they want to do at home, again come back at 12:30 for first shift. For smaller children it is up to 12 o'clock, and for bigger it is 3:30. So there are 2 shifts for dropping. So they can come back at 12 o'clock, do their duty, 1 o'clock again go back home, again come back at 3 o'clock and do that duty also. We are unable to find drivers, lady drivers. So it is supply side problem. We must understand that idea of status from rural to urban are different, from poor to rich are different. So when that migration happens from rural to urban, their idea of status changes. And not many women would like to become driver, because there is a status stigma there. Driver ban gaye? So that is how people call. So there is a supply side problem when it comes to driver. So that we need to address first. In my company, most of the, I would say, call center are ladies. Only at night we have male. But for 2 shifts, we have ladies. My holiday business is managed by my own wife. So that I call it as ladies club. So only 2 males are there, 18 females are there. So that is also ladies. In Bus Operators Confederation of India, we have started a sale, which we call it as Boki Nari, wherein we are trying to push more women employment, and particularly women entrepreneurs. Because if entrepreneur is woman, naturally she will employ more women. And that is example in my own home. So we are trying to promote that. And in multiple cities. Now we have entrepreneur ladies, and what we do, we particularly for our committees select women. They are not dummy owners. There are many dummy owners also. Husband is actually doing a work and women are there only for the namesake. We don't select them as a committee member. So in our committee, the women which are actually working towards this promoting women involvement in transport more, they are actually really entrepreneur. They are doing business on their own and they are quite enterprising. It is beneficial for us to have more women in the company or in the trade itself, because it brings discipline. Because all men, they want to impress women. So when even a single lady is in the office, everybody will come on time, they will remain up to date. So that is why it is very important that that discipline is maintained. And if you want to maintain that discipline, so having women in office is absolutely essential. That's what I feel. And same is the case with our depot also. We have some of the women which are doing accounting job or even in HR job. But when it comes to actual physical work, honestly speaking, we have not found lot many ladies to come for that job. So we need to select as a first step, low-hanging fruit, I would say, to have women wherein there is less physical work, but more attentive work, because women are more attentive. So call center, if there is a male candidate, he will go out at least during a day 3, 4, 5 times. Girl will not go out at least. She will go for 2 meals only, nothing more than that. So it is beneficial to have more ladies, more women, girls in the office or in this, any trade for that matter. So we are certainly working towards that as an organization, our own organization also, and as a confederation also.
Thank you very much, sir, for outlining some of these initiatives. I know we are over time, but I'd also like an opportunity to take maybe just 2 questions, extremely short, because I think we are keeping everyone over here.
One last question to Krishna.
Sorry, my bad. Sorry, yeah.
We're short of time, but this is a rather important question, and it's for Krishna Desai, the technical advisor of Sumaka GIC India. Now, Krishna, in your own presentation, in ITDP's presentation, in Urban Catalyst presentation, you heard, that there was adequate data to show that women inclusion in public transport remains limited. Now, the elephant in the room is that we've been talking about this subject for a few years now, right? We've been talking about it at UMIs year on year and very many other conferences. Now, how do we move this talk to action? Could you share from your perspective, from your organization's perspective, top 3 priorities India should focus on in the next 2 to 3 years? Let's have some actual immediate short-term targets to make public transport gender inclusive.
Thanks, Kashmira. So I think many of the panelists have already talked about what can be done and what should be done. But I think from our side, what are the 3 top priorities that should be focused upon? One can be institutionalization of, gender. So while, even in our presentation, we have seen that while there is infrastructure in place, there is always the gender aspect is always missing in these infrastructure, especially in transit infrastructure. One of the reasons for that is, of course, the lack of gender inclusion in the transport sector as such. But it is also that there are so many different institutions working when we look into the safety and security aspect, and when we look at the transport infrastructure. There's the municipal corporation, there's the transit infrastructure, there's the transit agency itself, there is the traffic police, there is the city police working on these aspects. And when we look at all these institutions, we generally find that the aspect of gender, or the number of women working in these agencies itself are so low. So it always, there's a need to institutionalize gender. There's a need to have a coordinating mechanism that can work across all these institutions. A good example of that is, of course, the Gender Lab, which is institutionalized in Chennai and now also in Surat. I think the Chennai Gender Lab has already started, working on developing gender-friendly bus stops. They have a checklist through which they see, whenever a new bus stop is developed, these are the aspects that should be looked into whenever you develop a bus stop. And I think they have even published the checklist for terminals and depots. Next, we come to gender inclusion. I think Rajni has already emphasized that, you need to have incentives to bring women on board. The second part is that, you also need to understand the issues that women face in coming into these kind of roles. You need to analyze, while we talk that, we need to have women across hierarchy, but you need to understand the issues and barriers they face, not only in terms of the qualification, but also the social aspects. So, we were having this discussion with one of the OEMs in one of the cities. So what they were saying that, under the CESL tender, it is mandatory to have around 20 or 25% of conductors and drivers. But it is very difficult to find women who are willing to come on board. One problem is the salary. The salaries are not competitive enough. The second issue for many cities, I'm not talking about all the cities, but for few of the cities, the salaries are not competitive enough for women to come into such kind of roles. The second problem they pointed out is that the depots and the terminals are so far away, it is very difficult to reach those places. So, you need to have flexible workplace policies. You need to invest. At this point of time, there is a need to invest to bring women on board. The third part is data, I think about which Mr. Vivek has already spoke about in detail and gone into the nitty-gritties of, what can be done. But I think comprehensive mobility plan, I would like to mention comprehensive mobility plan, that while it's, while the comprehensive mobility plans are prepared every 5 years, however, the data is collected on a disaggregated manner. Data for male and female is collected. However, it is not analyzed in disaggregated manner. You'll get the you'll get the trip rate, you'll get the affordability, the measure of affordability, you'll get the trip length, but you won't get it separate for men and women. You will get the OD patterns, but you won't get it separate for men and women. So I think it's very important to see, that what are the places, what are the priority areas where you need to create last mile connectivity. I think first and last mile connectivity has been identified, key issues has been identified, the areas of problem, and many women have said that, they find it unsafe. So I think it's important to see how the first and last mile connectivity can be improved and made more safer for them, and so that they can reach bus stops safely. So I think these are the three areas that should be looked into: institutionalization, gender inclusion, and data.
We are over time, but we would love to hear from a very patient audience. We will take them together. So if you have a burning question, please do introduce yourself and indicate to whom it is directed towards, but short, please. Okay.
Everybody's tired.
I think so, maybe. Everyone wants to go. All right. So I think with that, we'll...
Sure. No, with that, on that note, firstly, oh, you have a question. Please go for it.
We spoke a lot about gender disaggregated data. I think within gender, especially when talking about women, the way that it works for pregnant women and older women is also quite different. So when we're talking about gender disaggregated data, I know we're at a very preliminary stage of doing that in a country like India. Do we eventually plan on disaggregating it further to women who are expecting, young mothers, older women? How do we plan on doing that?
Pavni, who is this question to?
I think broadly to the panel and whoever would like to take it.
Sure. Anyone? Yes, please, go ahead.
No, I think there's no simple answer to it. But then again, I'm saying that a lot of ways one can really identify the data. And I think, the real use of AI is this. Do the image analytics, remove the specificity of the data, understand the patterns, and give pattern as a service. I'll give you an example. In Ahmedabad, I was driving one day, and I saw a pregnant woman with a child trying to cross the road. I was like 200 meters away. I could see that she was almost in tears and nobody was stopping. So I took the vehicle, blocked the 2 lanes, got out of the vehicle, asked her to cross. She hesitated. She thought, no, I don't know why is this man behaving like this? So that's the behavior, right? How do you stop this behavior? Consistency. Yesterday, I was talking to somebody who was a corporate trainer. He said, consistency is an answer to anything that you want to solve over a period of time. So this data consistently fed through different channels, different data sets, pointing to an outcome. I think that's how one has to be really looking at things. Smart cities have a lot of capability today. I think there's so much of AI being used in so many ways. Short LLMs is an answer to city problems. I think that's where we have to really start scratching our heads. And these LLMs are like a month away. It'll take not more than a month to train, edge devices to really spot patterns and send patterns as a service to whomsoever it is required, and then aggregate, where it is happening, why it is happening, what do you need to do with that data. I think that's where the framework works.
In contract carriage, the data what you're talking about is somewhat available because we get all information before that person travels. So for example, in some of our routes, 32% women travel. In some of our routes, 38% travel. Then we also have data wherein women traveling with child. But that data is available for only intercity coaches. And which is not available, which cannot be made available in stage carriages.
Great. Thank you all very much. And with that, we do come to a conclusion of this very interesting panel discussion. First of all, a big thank you to the audience for sitting with us right from 4:30. But I sincerely hope you found this discussion very useful and, more importantly, very inspired to do your bit, because all of you, I know, are experts in this room. Now, coming on to our wonderful panelists and our chair, thank you very much for being present here today. I know a lot of you don't live in Gurugram, and you all have traveled all the way, braved the pollution, the high AQIs, the traffic, but it's fantastic that you all have been able to be here for this very fruitful conversation. And I hope that this conversation really turns into some action on ground in the upcoming years. So at Next UMI, we are talking about what we've already done rather than what we should be doing. And on that note, we also have a publication that my colleague Ravneet had mentioned at the very beginning of the presentation. It is one that's been developed by GIZ and ITDP India, and for that, from the GIZ team, I would like to thank the on-ground support of Neetu Anna, Joseph, Shri Harsha Chaudhary, Asta Malhotra, and under the guidance of Manjunath Shekhar, Zora Mutabana, Rana Anwar Amani, and Krishna Desai. And on behalf of the ITDP team, I also missed thanking the team of Strategies to Scale for conducting the in-depth assessment of the 2 city case studies. And on behalf of ITDP India, I would like to thank Vaishali, who was a former ITDP India colleague, but she's been an integral part in developing a publication. Ravneet Kaur for her on-ground support under the guidance of Ashwati Dilip and Shiva Subramaniam Jayaraman. And of course, thank you very much to Dr. Surya Kiran, under whose guidance as the ASRTU ex-ED, we were able to collect all the extensive data. And lastly, I would also like to thank the urban catalysts, Sonal Shah and Manisha Sharma. Thank you very much for being great co-hosts for this very informative panel discussion. And thank you very much. Would you like to take a photo?
Yeah, and then Radha for the mementos. So we will memento.
Radha, will you be talking? Okay. Sorry, if you can just give a second to Miss Radha. Thank you.
Memento.
Thank you, Chairperson Ma'am, for being here today. Thank you, Sonal ma'am, and thank you, Kashmira ma'am, for conducting the session so smoothly and keeping the discussions lively. Now, I would like to request the Honorable Chair of this session to kindly present the mementos to our esteemed speakers in the order of their appearance and followed by the moderator as a token of our appreciation for their valuable contribution. Ma'am. It's a gift. Yeah, yeah. You have please get. Yes. Dr. Ms. Krishna Desai, Technical Advisor, Sumaka, DIZ, India. Ms. Pamela Basil, Deputy Head of Economic Cooperation and Development, Embassy of Federal Republic of Germany. Dr. Rajni Tiwari, Chief People Officer, Green Cell Mobility. Mr. Prasanna Patwardhan, Chairman and Managing Director, PP Mobility Solutions Private Limited. Mr. Surya Kiran, former ED, ASRTU. Mr. Vivek Ogra, Partner Transport, Ernst and Young LLP, Ahmedabad. Dr. T. Prabhushankar, Managing Director, MTC Chennai Limited. Ms. Avani Lavasa, Administrative Secretary, Transport Department, Government of Jammu and Kashmir. Thank you, ma'am. Now, I would like to Pamela Basil, ma'am, to kindly come forward and present a memento to the Honorable Chair of the session as a token of respect. Thank you, ma'am. As we conclude, oh, no, it's okay. Yeah, you can sit, please. Thank you, ma'am. It's done. No, ma'am. Ms. Sonal Shah, founder, the Urban Catalyst. Ms. Kashmira Duvas, Deputy Director, ITDP, India. Thank you so much, ma'am. Please sit. As we conclude, I, Radha Gupta, Section Officer, on behalf of Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, wish to express heartfelt gratitude to all the dignitaries, speakers, and participants for their valuable contributions in making this session a success. Before we close, I would like to announce and invite you all for the dinner that will start from 7 p.m. onwards in PFA 1 and PFA 2 areas. Thank you for being here.